The holiday pie was still warm in my passenger seat when I pulled into my daughter's driveway, 20 minutes late. I had my excuse ready, a last-minute emergency at work that I couldn't avoid. But as I reached the heavy oak front door, I heard the room inside quiet down for a toast. I didn't knock. I just stood there in the cold, listening through the slightly open window. That's when my daughter raised her glass, looked around the table of laughing faces, and said, "Honestly, it'd be better if she didn't come at all. We finally have peace." The laughter that followed tore through me like a blade. But as I stood on that porch, holding the keys to the very house they were celebrating in, I realized something they didn't. They thought they were cutting me out of their lives, but they had just walked straight into a trap of their own making. My name is Sarah Jenkins, and at 42 years old, I thought I had built a life rooted in love, stability, and family. I was wrong. The holiday pie was still warm in my passenger seat when I pulled into my daughter's driveway, 20 minutes late. I had my excuse ready, a last-minute emergency at work that I simply couldn't avoid. But as I reached the heavy oak front door, I heard the room inside quiet down for a toast. I didn't knock. I just stood there in the bitter cold, listening through the slightly open window. That's when my daughter, Chloe, raised her glass, looked around the table of laughing faces, and said, "Honestly, it'd be better if she didn't come at all. We finally have peace." The burst of laughter that followed tore through me like a serrated blade. Standing on that porch, holding the keys to the very house they were celebrating in, I realized something they didn't. They thought they were cutting me out, but they had just walked straight into a trap of their own making. I quietly turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. For 22 years, my entire existence revolved around sacrifice. When my ex-husband, Mark, walked away from our marriage, he left behind a trail of unpaid debts and endless excuses. I didn't have the luxury of giving up. I picked up double shifts at the firm, skipped meals, and worked 80-hour weeks just to ensure our daughter, Chloe, never felt the sting of financial hardship. I paid off every single cent of her college tuition, bought her first car, and eventually purchased the very house she was sitting in that night. Yet, no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. Mark would surface once a year with cheap gifts and empty promises, instantly becoming the fun, cool parent in her eyes, while I was reduced to the overbearing bank account. I swallowed my pride for years, making excuses for Chloe's growing arrogance, convincing myself that she was just young and naive. But sitting in my car after hearing that toast, the veil finally lifted. I wasn't her mother to her. I was just a walking checkbook she had learned to resent, and it was time for that tab to close permanently. I drove straight home in complete silence, the warmth of the car heater doing nothing to melt the ice in my chest. Pouring a quiet glass of wine, I sat at my desk and pulled up my laptop. It was time to audit the life I had so blindly funded. I opened the digital files for the property Chloe was living in, planning to review the formal lease agreement I'd been preparing to sign over to her as a Christmas present. But as I dug deeper into the joint account statements and property records, my blood ran cold. Chloe and Mark hadn't just been waiting for Christmas. They had already hired an independent lawyer to file a petition claiming sole possession of the estate, falsely alleging I had promised the house as a tax-free gift years ago. They were actively trying to strip my name off the deed before I even realized what was happening. Their cruelty on the porch wasn't just impulsive disrespect. It was a calculated scheme to push me away before their betrayal came to light. The next morning, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a text from Chloe. "We missed you so much yesterday, Mom. Hope work wasn't too crazy. Love you." 6 months ago, those words would have made me feel guilty. Today, they just disgusted me. I took a slow sip of my coffee, typed back a brief, "Work was fine. Glad you had fun," and closed the screen. Instead of exploding, I called my real estate attorney, David. Since the title to the house was 100% in my name, and Chloe had only been living there under an informal, rent-free agreement, I held every legal card. I instructed David to halt the Christmas property transfer immediately. "David," I said calmly, "I want the house listed on the market by Monday morning, and I need a formal 30-day notice to vacate served directly to Chloe." David hesitated over the phone, asking if I was sure about evicting my own daughter. I assured him my mind was entirely clear. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a necessary business decision. I was simply restructuring my personal assets. Chloe and Mark wanted a life completely free of my presence. Now, I was going to give them the full experience, starting with the loss of their rent-free paradise. 3 days later, the storm hit. The door to my office slammed open, and Chloe marched in, her face flushed with rage, closely followed by Mark holding a legal document. "Are you out of your mind?" Chloe screamed, throwing the formal notice to vacate onto my desk. "You're kicking me out of my own home over a late Thanksgiving dinner? You're a psycho, Mom." Mark stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "You can't do this, Sarah. We have rights, and we will take you to court." I didn't flinch. I slowly leaned back in my executive chair, unlocked my phone, and pressed play on a recorded voice memo. Chloe's own voice echoed through the office speakers, crisp and damning. Honestly, it'd be better if she didn't come at all. "We finally have peace." The color drained from Chloe's face instantly. Her mouth fell open, her self-righteous anger evaporating into sheer panic as she realized I had been standing on that cold porch, hearing every single word. Mark looked between us, suddenly speechless. "You wanted peace without me, Chloe," I said, my voice ice-cold. "Now you get to pay for it yourself." Mark tried to bluster about legal action, but my lawyer shut him down instantly. With every deed, tax record, and bank statement firmly in my name, they didn't have a leg to stand on. Within 2 weeks, the house was listed and sold above market value. Without my financial lifeline, Mark's grand facade completely collapsed. He couldn't afford to cover Chloe's lavish lifestyle, let alone his own back taxes. For the first time in her life, Chloe was forced to pack up her designer clothes, move into a tiny, outdated one-bedroom apartment, and take on a second job just to pay rent. She called me crying twice, begging me to reconsider, but I held the line. They had spent years wishing for a life completely free of my presence, and now they were finally living with the exact price tag of that wish. 6 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new coastal home, watching the waves roll in as the sun dipped below the horizon. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I had finally learned that holding hard boundaries isn't an act of revenge. It's the highest form of self-respect. I stopped funding people who only loved me for what I provided, and in doing so, I finally reclaimed my own life. Sometimes, the best response to disrespect isn't an argument. It's simply walking away, closing the door, and letting people experience the reality of life without you.